Hey, how's it going, guys? In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Python to export records from a Google Sheets to a database system. Alright, so I'll be using a SQL Server database as an example, but you can use any database system that supports ODBC Connection Manager, such as Oracle, MySQL, SQLite, or even Microsoft Access. Alright, so here in my Google Sheets on the Accept Data Set Inventory worksheet, I want to take this data set. I want to insert to my SQL Server database accept open data set inventory table. Now let me clear the table content first. Alright, so I just cleared my table, my accept open data set inventory table. And I used the data set from data accept open source, which is this data set inventory table. And these are the columns. Here, let me explain all the columns from this data set. And let me take a look at my Google Sheets. So I don't want to import all the columns. I just want to import the columns that I'm interested in, and which is going to be these columns. And the end goal is to take this data set and write a Python script to migrate the record set to the accept open data set inventory table in my SQL Server database. Alright, so here let's dive into the Python script. And because we'll be using Google Sheets API to access the record set in Google Sheets, so here I wrote a module called google.py, and this is a different module from the regular Google module, which is going to be lowercase g. And I know some people get confused because I've been using this script for way too long, so I can just change the module name, unfortunately. Inside the Google module, I wrote a couple functions to simplify the Google API service creation. And you can download the source code from the link in the description below. Alright, so here, let me close this window. In my demo.py script, here, let me increase the font size. From the import statement, I'm going to import pandas module to clean the data set. And to connect to my database, I'm going to use the ODBC library. I'll name this as ODBC. And here I can install the library using the command pip install. And this one's going to be pandas. And this one's going to be ODBC. And from the Google module, I'm going to import the create service function and the Google Sheets helper class. Alright, so here let's connect to our Google Sheets first. But first we need to provide the required information. And this one's going to be client secret file, or your client file, followed by the API name, API version, and the scopes. Alright, for the scopes, I'm going to use the spreadsheet scope, which is going to give me full permission to a Google Sheets document. And the API address is going to be googleapis.com/auth/spreadsheets. And here I'll import the Google Sheets. Here, not import. Here I'll create an instance of the Google Sheets helper object. I'll name the object Sheets helper. Then I'll construct my Google Sheets API service instance by using the create service function. Alright, so here let's create our Sheet API service instance by providing the client file, API name, API version, and the scopes. And let me go ahead and run this code block. I need to authenticate the account that I want to use. I'm going to choose, let me take a look. Alright, so I'll use my secondary account. Alright, so once you get to this page, click on Events, and then click on this link to proceed. And click on Continue. Now I have created my Sheet API service instance. And to verify that the service is successfully created, I can use the third function to print the members of the service object. And at the end, you should be able to see the spreadsheet resource is now available. Now I want to create a class. I want to name the class Database Manager. And it's going to be the class we're going to use to manage our database connection. And the Database Manager class takes two parameters, server name, actually service name. Actually, no, I took that back. It should be server name and the database name. Now I want to create my attributes, server name and database name. And this one's going to be my connection. And I'll set the default to none. So within the Database Manager class, I want to create a method to initialize the connection. I'll name the method initialize connection. Then we insert try except block. And for the exception, I'll print the error message and I'll set the connection object to none. Inside the try block, I'll create my connection object by referencing the ODBC library.connect. And here we need to specify the driver name. Then it's going to be SQL Server, followed by a semicolon. And for the server name, this one's going to be database name. Here, let me convert this to F string. I need to insert two curly brackets to insert curly bracket character. Maybe just one. Maybe just one. If you are connecting to your SQL Server database with a username and password, then you will need to insert the UID property for the username and PWD for the password. And if we have created the connection object successfully without running into any error, then I want to print message connection created successfully. Now I want to create another method called run query, and this method basically will run the SQL statement that we pass to the method. And we're going to have a parameter called SQL statement. And here I want to insert if statement, if self.connection is none. Then I want to print message connection is absent. Then X out the method. Otherwise, I want to create a cursor object. And we can create a cursor object by referencing the connection object, followed by inserting the cursor method. And the cursor method is basically access point to your tables. And we can pass the SQL statement that we want to execute. And to get the columns or the column headers. So here I want to reference here, let's do this. So from cursor.description, and this output is going to return the columns metadata, which including the data type, column name, column size, and some of the other information. But I'm only interested in the label name. So I'm going to say for column in cursor.description. And the label name is going to be the first element. And I'll set this to a tuple. I want to grab the record set by referencing the cursor object, followed by inserting the fetch method. Then I want to return both column headers and the record set itself. And just in case if I want to reference the connection object, I want to convert that to a property, or basically a regular attribute. And this one's going to be connection. And I want to return the connection object. And the last method I'm going to create is the close connection method. Otherwise, it's going to lock the table. And here, if I run into an exception, I'm simply going to X out the method. And here I'll attempt to close the database. Actually, not database, connection. And here I want to type connection is terminated. Alright, so let me go ahead and create a database manager class. Now we're going to connect to our SQL Server database. But first we need to provide our server name. And let me get my server name. And we need to provide a database name. And it's going to be open data from my local database. Alright, so here I'm going to create an instance of the database manager object. And I'll provide my server name and the database name. Now let me go ahead and create these three items. Right, so if I simply reference the connection attribute, oh, it should be DB manager. It's not going to return anything because we haven't created the connection yet. And we can do that by referencing the initialize connection method. It looks like the request is getting denied. And let me take a look. Right, so the database name is correct, open data, and the server name is correct as well. And that means my connection string is probably incorrect. Right, so here let me troubleshoot the method first. And to do that, so here I'll simply print this statement. And I'll come out the connection creation. And I'll recreate the database manager class. Alright, so let me try again. So here I forgot to specify the database I want to connect to. And this should be server name, not database name. So this will be database is equals to self.database name. And semicolon. Let me try again. So delete the connection attribute. Oh, forgot to come out this line right here. Let me do it again. And here's the connection created successfully message. Now if I print the connection attribute, and that's going to return my connection object. Now at this point, I have successfully connected to my SQL Server database and my Google Sheets document. And let me insert notes. So yeah, let's move the class to the top. And this one will be Sheets API connection. And this will be database connection. And I'm using a SQL Server database. Now, if we think about the workflow, the first step is we need to import the record set from a Google Sheets worksheet. In my case, it's going to be from SF data set inventory. And to connect to my Google Sheets document, I need the Google Sheets ID. And here, let me create a variable called Google Sheets ID. And I'll assign the ID to the variable. Now let's go ahead and retrieve the records from a Google Sheets document. And we can do that by using the spreadsheet resource.values.get method. .SQL. Oops. Inside the get method, we need to supply the spreadsheet ID. And since I'm going to import the entire table, so I can simply insert the worksheet name. But first, I want to set the major dimension, how I want to retrieve the data set by rows. And for the range, as I mentioned before, since I'm going to retrieve the entire table, I don't need to specify the cell range. I can simply insert the worksheet name. And I'll print the, oh, I forgot to create the sheets ID variable. And I'll go ahead and create the response object. And if I print the response object, and here's my record set. Alright, so there were too many rows, but here let's print the keys. We have 3 keys, range, major dimension, and values. And the record set is sitting on the values key. So here let me retrieve the values from the response object. Alright, so if I print the first record, and it's going to return the column headers. And that's not what I want. And I want to skip the column headers. Oh, and one more thing. If I go back to my SF data set inventory table, noticing that for some of the columns, we have some empty cells. So for example, for record number 8, if I print the element count, and it's going to return 11. It's not right. I feel like something's off. This should be 8. Here, let me print the next record. Okay. If we print the 10th record, oh, because before I forgot to include the count headers into consideration. Alright, so if I print the 10th record, noticing that my output ignores the empty cells. And we need to figure out the empty cells and able to insert the records in the correct location. So a workaround is, actually my preferred workaround method is to use pandas library. Right, so here, let me go ahead and create another variable called columns. From the records object, I can grab the labels from the first row. Now to create a data frame object, I'll pass the data as records from the second row to the last row. I'll insert my columns header. And if I go here and create the DF object or data frame object, and if I print the table, the pandas library is going to organize the data as a regular table that is going to be identical to my inventory table in Google Sheets. Now to convert the DF object back to a regular list, I'll call this records clean. Oh, this should be values. Now if I print the 10th record, and this time the last 3 cells is going to return none. Now we have imported the data set from our Google Sheets into our Python script. I need to take the record set and insert that onto my SQL Server open data set, my open data set inventory table. Now here, let me create my SQL statement for the insertion. So here, let me copy paste the SQL statement, so that'll be quicker. So here's the record insertion SQL statement to the SF open data set inventory table. And here's the column headers or column names. And notice that here, so each question mark is kind of like a variable placeholder. Basically, the PY/ODBC library is intelligent enough that you'll be able to look at this SQL statement, and based on the question mark, it knows that each question mark is associated to, actually not associated, is corresponding to each column that you specify in your SQL statement. Now let me go ahead and create my cursor object. So from DB manager.connection.cursor, from the cursor object, we can execute a SQL statement by using the execute method or the execute many method. And let's take a look at how many records we have from the record clean object. Actually, records clean object. Oops. Alright, so we have 1051 records. Let me just double check. Okay, that's correct. So inside the execute many method, that means the SQL statement followed by the values. Now if I execute these 2 lines, oh, let me create my SQL statement. So I've executed the SQL statement, but if I go back to my SQL Server database, and if I run the select statement, noticing that the table is going to be locked. And that's because this statement is still connecting to the SF open data set inventory table. And to unlock the table, we need to commit the SQL statement to finalize that this is the action we want to perform. So let me run line 81. Now let me run the select statement. And this time it took less than 1 second to print the table. Now let me do the insertion one more time. I'm going to clear the table. And right now the table is empty. And let me terminate the session. Oh, actually there's one more thing. So we need to close the connection when we are done with the task. Now let me terminate the session. And this time I'm going to, let me clean my code. Now this time I'm going to press F5 to run the script by itself. And it looks like the script is finished. Now if I go back to my select statement and run it, and here's my data set coming from the Google Sheets SF data set inventory table. Alright, so this is going to be everything I'm going to cover in this video. And hopefully you guys found this video useful. And as always, thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.